So here we are on Wikipedia. This is obviously a very cursory treatment of this. For a more complete Chinese history, you could go with Penguin's History of Modern China, which I've also consulted for various things. But this is not so much about railway history on this page. This is just the History of China Wikipedia page. But if we look at the 19th century and we line up Chinese history with Chinese railway history, History of Rail Transport in China has its own page. So it says, in 1864, a British merchant built a 600-meter-long narrow-gauge railroad outside the Huanhu Gate in Beijing to demonstrate the technology to the imperial court. The court found it exceedingly special and strange in the utmost, and promptly had the railway dismantled. And then the Wusong Road was another railway in 1876 that ran from July of that year to October 1877, when the emperor again had it dismantled. And there were various efforts subsequently made, although they faced a certain amount of government opposition. It explains this in some detail here, although again, this is a Wikipedia page and not a proper railway history book. And most of these railways were built with foreign money, which may have played some role in the political opposition. It wasn't until this man, I probably can't pronounce his name correctly, but the so-called father of Chinese railways, educated in the United States, was involved in building the first entirely Chinese-backed railway project, or at least mostly China. So, the railway protection movement was actually important to the downfall of the emperor eventually, even though the emperor greatly loosened restrictions on railways from 1895 onward. There was a political protest movement in 1911, which was literally only a year before Sun Yat-sen's rebellion against the monarchy, which overthrew it. It wasn't even so much about protecting the railways per se, but protecting local Chinese control of the railways, because the emperor was threatening to nationalize the railways for the purpose of handing them over to foreign banks. Of course, the revolution backed by Sun Yat-sen is generally called the Xinhai Revolution. So actually, I'm understating the case. It did start in 1911 in the same era as the railway protection movement, but was successful by 1912. But all of this is ignored in Railroad Tycoon 2, which is a little bit frustrating because it would make a more interesting map if it were designed professionally by Pop Top or Sid Meier or somebody. Another crucial omission of Railroad Tycoon's China map is the Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion is generally accepted to have started in 1851, led by Hong Xiuan, if I'm pronouncing his name right, who was a Christian cult leader, actually. Although somewhat controversially, you could say the government troops fired first. They don't know the full death toll of it, but it's been estimated at from 20 million to as high as 100 million, which illustrates that the record keeping was not very good. And the accepted date for the start of the conflict was January 1st of 1851, when the Qing dynasty So the monarch, basically the emperor, launched an attack against the cult at Jintian. Although, obviously, this cult had been around considerably longer. And even if you go with the low estimate of 20 million, let's take a look at World War I. Give it time to call up here. In World War I, for which we have better records, the total military dead, if you combine both sides, was pushing 10 million. And if you include civilian casualties, then you're talking about 30 million, a little over 30 million. Which could be less than the Taiping Rebellion. So some historians consider the worst war in human history until World War II to have been World War I, and some consider the Taiping Rebellion to hold the position. And it's largely a matter of which records you consider credible. Wikipedia claim a best estimate of 20 to 30 million, which puts the Taiping Rebellion in the same ballpark anyway as World War I. I don't know how credible that number is, though, because this is Wikipedia. But this would have been highly significant also if railways had existed at the time, because obviously when you have large swaths of territory that are involved in a war of this magnitude, there are large portions of territory that you lose control of. And I've attempted to simulate this in my map, albeit with a somewhat limited territories function. I've taken these areas out of commission, during different times of the war when they would have been under rebel control. But it is a big what-if of history. How much trouble a railway would have had if there had been a significant railway company operating in China at the time of the rebellion. The rebellion didn't end all at once, of course, even though it was largely defeated by, as it's saying there, August of 1864. There was sporadic fighting for many, many years after, with remnants of the Taiping rebels. And here I have some other Wikipedia pages, like one for China Railway, which is the national Chinese railway company, founded in 1950. And here we have the Wusong Road, which was the first commercial railway venture that lasted only a few months from 1876 to 1877. And then the Beijing Baotou Railway, which was the one involving Sun, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. So anyway, I'll show you my playthrough. I will not pretend that my playthrough is the most authentic one I could possibly put together. It has a mixture of real history, expedient events that are good for Railroad Tycoon 2, and a little bit of humor. But it is, I think, a better map than the original one by far.